Imagine your loved one leaving home for a quick dinner and never returning. No calls, no texts, no signs. Days pass, hope fades, and rumors swirl. What really happened that night? This is the heartbreaking mystery of 24-year-old Jacob Vanzant. The story begins on February 17, 2023, in the city of Lodi, California. Jacob Vanzant, a cheerful 24-year-old, had a fairly routine day. He wasn't someone living a risky lifestyle, nor was he known for reckless behavior. He was simply like thousands of other young adults, working, spending time with friends, and building his future. That evening, Jacob decided to step out in his white 2004 Honda Pilot. The plan seemed simple: grab some dinner, enjoy his time, and return home. But that would be the last time his family saw him alive. When Jacob didn't come back that night, his family's concern quickly turned into panic. He was always in touch with his mother, Joanna, and his sister Jessica, and it was unusual for him to go completely silent. Hours passed, then an entire day, and still no word from Jacob. The situation became unbearable, and the family had no choice but to report him missing to the police. Initially, the authorities treated the case as a normal missing person report. There was no evidence of foul play, no immediate clues that suggested a crime. But very soon, they learned something that raised the level of urgency. Jacob suffered from certain medical conditions that put his well-being at serious risk. This wasn't just a case of a young man walking away from home. It was a potentially life-threatening disappearance. The days that followed were filled with heartbreak. Flyers went up across town, social media posts spread rapidly, and friends formed search groups. Jacob's name became a local headline, but despite the attention, no progress was made. His Honda Pilot was nowhere to be found, and the trail had gone completely cold. For his mother and sister, every passing hour felt like a year. Joanna described the experience as living in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Jessica, equally devastated, turned her energy towards spreading awareness, pleading with anyone who might have seen her brother to come forward. The unanswered questions haunted everyone. Did Jacob get into an accident? Was he the victim of foul play? Or did something else happen that nobody could explain? By the end of the first week, the Vanzant family felt lost, desperate, and out of options. But they had no idea that soon, an unexpected team of strangers would step in, changing the course of this case forever. As the days stretched into weeks, the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on the Vanzant family. The initial hope that Jacob might suddenly return home, or at least call to explain his absence, was fading fast. Every sunrise brought new anxiety, and every sunset carried the same painful question: where was Jacob? His mother, Joanna, tried to keep herself strong, but behind closed doors she broke down constantly. Friends and neighbors would stop by to comfort her, yet nothing could silence the voice inside her heart screaming that something was terribly wrong. Jacob's sister Jessica, on the other hand, took a more active role. She became the family's spokesperson, sharing Jacob's picture on social media, organizing search efforts, and even contacting news outlets to keep his story alive. The Vanzants understood something crucial. If they let Jacob's name fade from the public's mind, the search for him would weaken. So they poured every ounce of energy into making sure the community didn't forget. Missing person flyers decorated lampposts, shop windows, and gas stations across Stockton and Lodi. Volunteers joined search groups, combing through nearby fields, parks, and back roads. But despite these efforts, the mystery deepened. Jacob's car, a white 2004 Honda Pilot, was still missing. In most missing person cases, a vehicle is a critical clue, often leading to the location of the individual. But here it had simply vanished without a trace. That absence puzzled not only the family, but also law enforcement. Detectives looked into Jacob's phone records, bank transactions, and social media activity. None of them offered answers. His phone had gone dark the night he disappeared, and there were no suspicious financial activities. It was as if Jacob and his car had been swallowed by the earth. During this period, speculation began to rise. Some believed Jacob might have driven off somewhere to escape the stress of life, while others worried he might have been the victim of an accident on one of California's rural roads. A few feared foul play, but none of these theories had evidence behind them. Meanwhile, Joanna and Jessica faced a cruel emotional roller coaster. Each phone call or new lead offered a flicker of hope, only to be crushed when it led nowhere. They struggled to eat, struggled to sleep, and lived in constant torment. Jessica admitted in one interview, "Every time the phone rings, I wonder if it's Jacob, or if it's someone telling me the worst news of my life." The local police tried their best, but their resources were limited. With no solid leads, the case began to stall. The Vanzants felt the system was failing them, though the officers assured them they were doing everything possible. Still, the silence was unbearable. And then, just as the family's desperation was reaching its breaking point, someone suggested turning to a very unusual group, an independent diving and recovery team known as Adventures with Purpose, AWP. At first, Joanna didn't know what to think. Could a group of volunteer divers succeed where law enforcement had failed? She didn't realize it yet, but reaching out to AWP would be the decision that finally unlocked the heartbreaking truth about her son. When all official leads had dried up, the Vanzant family faced a painful truth. The traditional investigation was getting nowhere. Weeks had passed since Jacob vanished, and his car was still unaccounted for. For many families, this would have been the breaking point. But Joanna and Jessica refused to give up. They turned to a group unlike any other. Adventures with Purpose, AWP. AWP wasn't law enforcement, nor a private detective agency. They were a team of volunteer divers armed with cutting-edge sonar technology driven by a singular mission to locate missing people, particularly in cases where vehicles might have ended up underwater. Their track record was remarkable. Dozens of cold cases solved, families given closure after years of painful uncertainty. When the Vanzants contacted AWP, the group immediately agreed to help. For Joanna, it was both a leap of faith and a glimmer of hope. Could these strangers succeed where official resources had failed? Soon, the team arrived in San Joaquin County, focusing their efforts on the river systems near Lodi. Their strategy was straightforward but powerful. Scan the waterways with sonar, identify anomalies, and then send divers down to investigate. To the family, it felt surreal, watching ordinary-looking boats carry extraordinary equipment, hoping that beneath the calm water lay the answer they'd been chasing. As AWP began their search in the Little Potato Slough, every beep of sonar and every shadow on the monitor made hearts race. Joanna and Jessica stood on the shore, torn between dread and relief. Part of them wanted answers. Another part feared what those answers might reveal. Unknowingly, they were standing on the edge of a heartbreaking discovery that would finally solve the mystery of Jacob's disappearance. The morning was quiet when the Adventures with Purpose, AWP team, launched their boats into the Little Potato Slough, a winding section of the San Joaquin River. For weeks, Jacob's family had lived with uncertainty, and now all eyes were on the divers. Joanna clutched her daughter Jessica's hand tightly, both of them silently praying for answers, even if those answers brought heartbreak. The sonar scan began slowly. Every sweep of the equipment painted ghostly images on the screen. Shadows, shapes, outlines of debris resting beneath the water. The team had worked dozens of similar cases before, and they knew what to look for. To the untrained eye, the sonar display was confusing, but for AWP, each cluster of dots and lines carried meaning. Then it happened. A distinct outline appeared. It was rectangular, large, and suspiciously consistent with the size of a vehicle. The divers exchanged looks. This wasn't just debris. This could be Jacob's missing Honda Pilot. Joanna and Jessica's hearts sank. They knew this might be the breakthrough they'd been waiting for, but the reality of what it meant was almost unbearable. Still, they wanted the truth. The divers geared up. Slowly, they descended into the murky water. Visibility was low. The riverbed was dark and filled with silt, but just a few feet above the bottom, their flashlights revealed it. The faint curve of a wheel, then the roof of a submerged SUV. There was no denying it. They had found a car. One diver swam closer, brushing away layers of mud. The Honda emblem shimmered under the beam of light. It was Jacob's vehicle. Back on the surface, the news hit like a tidal wave. Joanna collapsed into tears, Jessica held her mother, and silence gripped the shoreline. The family's worst fear had been confirmed, yet in that moment, they also felt a strange kind of relief. The unbearable not knowing was ending. The divers carefully checked inside the vehicle. Through the fogged windows, they spotted what no family ever wants to see: a human body in the driver's seat. Although the official coroner would later confirm it, everyone already knew it was Jacob. The discovery was devastating, but it also brought closure. The mystery that had consumed weeks of sleepless nights was solved. The San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office arrived to oversee the recovery, documenting the scene with the professionalism required for such tragedies. For AWP, it was another mission completed. For the Vanzants, it was the hardest moment of their lives, but also the end of a chapter that had nearly destroyed them. Standing near the riverbank, Joanna whispered, "At least we found him. At least he's not lost anymore." The water had finally given up its secret, and with it, the family could begin to grieve, heal, and honor Jacob's memory. The recovery of Jacob Vanzant's Honda Pilot from the San Joaquin River marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, one filled with grief, acceptance, and the slow search for peace. After the vehicle was pulled from the water, authorities sealed off the area to conduct their official examination. The San Joaquin County Coroner's Office arrived quickly, working with law enforcement to carefully document the discovery. Though the body inside was badly damaged from weeks underwater, the confirmation came swiftly. It was indeed 24-year-old Jacob Vanzant. For Joanna, the words felt like a dagger to the heart. Though she had prepared herself for this possibility, hearing it spoken aloud made the loss unbearably real. She broke down as Jessica wrapped her arms around her, both of them trembling in the raw weight of truth. The hope they had clung to for so long was gone. What remained was grief, and yet, as painful as it was, there was also a strange sense of relief. The endless nights of asking, "Where is Jacob?" were over. Now they knew. There would be no more second-guessing, no more wondering if he was out there waiting to be found. That chapter had closed. The news spread quickly through Stockton and Lodi. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had followed Jacob's story on social media shared their condolences. A makeshift memorial appeared near the family home. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes expressing sympathy and love. People who had never met Jacob felt connected to his journey. Community support poured in. Vigils were organized, and online groups sent messages of comfort to the Vanzant family. Many praised Adventures with Purpose for their tireless dedication, recognizing that without their intervention, Jacob might never have been found. Some called the divers angels on earth, while others highlighted the importance of such volunteer efforts in bridging the gaps that official investigations often leave behind. For Joanna, each gesture meant the world. She expressed her gratitude publicly, thanking everyone who had prayed, searched, and stood by her family during the darkest weeks of their lives. Jessica, though heartbroken, spoke about honoring her brother's memory. She described him as kind, gentle, and always ready to make people smile. Meanwhile, questions remained about how Jacob's car ended up submerged in the first place. Authorities suggested it was most likely a tragic accident, though speculation lingered. Had he become disoriented while driving? Did his health issues play a role? These questions could not erase the outcome, but they haunted the minds of many who followed the case. Through the grief and speculation, one truth stood firm. Jacob's story had touched countless lives. His disappearance was not just another headline, it was a reminder of how fragile life is and how vital community and compassion are in moments of crisis. For the Vanzant family, the battle had shifted. No longer were they fighting the unknown. Now, they faced the harder struggle of learning to live without Jacob. When Jacob Vanzant's body was finally identified, the confirmation brought with it a storm of emotions. For weeks, Joanna and Jessica had lived in a suspended reality, clinging to hope while fearing the worst. Now, the truth was undeniable. Jacob was gone. For Joanna, the silence that filled her home after the discovery was almost unbearable. She had spent so many nights staring at her phone, waiting for updates, replaying the last time she saw her son and whispering prayers into the darkness. Now the waiting was over, but the silence felt heavier than ever. When he was missing, I couldn't sleep because I was desperate to know, she later said. Now I can't sleep because I do know. Jessica processed her grief differently. She had been the fighter, the one organizing search efforts, calling detectives, and speaking to reporters. With Jacob's recovery, her role shifted. The frantic searching was over, and in its place came a crushing grief, mixed with a new responsibility to make sure her brother's life and story were not forgotten. In the days that followed, the Vanzant home became a gathering place. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers arrived with flowers, food, and warm embraces. Many admitted that they had never met Jacob, but had been following his case and felt connected to his journey. The outpouring of support was both comforting and overwhelming. Joanna often cried as she opened letters from people across the country, words of sympathy from those who had experienced similar loss, and from others simply touched by Jacob's story. Jessica took strength from this community. She began writing publicly, posting about Jacob's kindness, his quiet sense of humor, and his love for his family. She described him not as a missing person, but as a vibrant young man who deserved to be remembered for who he truly was. Her posts were shared widely, and soon Jacob's story was reaching far beyond Stockton, becoming a symbol of how fragile life is and how important it is to hold on to the people we love. At the same time, Adventures with Purpose, AWP, continued to draw national attention. Their role in recovering Jacob highlighted once again the importance of their mission. Unlike official investigations, which often run out of resources or overlook underwater searches, AWP specialized in going where others could not. For many, they became living proof that ordinary citizens could make an extraordinary difference. Joanna and Jessica personally thanked the divers, calling them angels in wetsuits. They spoke about how AWP had given them the one thing they thought they might never have: closure. "It doesn't take away the pain," Joanna said, "but it gives us a place to start healing." And healing, though slow, had to begin. Joanna found comfort in small rituals, lighting candles for Jacob, keeping his favorite belongings close, and speaking his name often. She wanted the world to know that her son was more than a headline. Jessica, meanwhile, turned her grief into advocacy. She spoke at local events about the importance of missing person awareness and urged law enforcement to work more closely with volunteer groups like AWP. Her determination inspired others, especially families still waiting for answers about their own loved ones. But grief is not a straight path. Some days were filled with strength and purpose. Others were consumed by tears and exhaustion. The Vanzants understood that the journey would not be easy. Birthdays, holidays, and quiet family dinners now carried a hollow absence where Jacob should have been. Yet through their pain, they leaned on one another and on the community that had rallied around them. Beyond Stockton, Jacob's story sparked broader conversations. Families with missing loved ones reached out to Joanna and Jessica, sharing their own stories and finding hope in the Vanzant family's ability to keep searching until answers came. Online, people discussed how tragedies like Jacob's highlighted the need for better infrastructure in missing person cases, better communication between agencies, quicker access to search resources, and more attention to cases that often fall through the cracks. For the Vanzants, the most important thing was that Jacob's memory lived on. They chose to remember his laughter, his kindness, and the joy he brought into their lives. They wanted the world to see beyond the tragedy and understand the full, beautiful life Jacob had lived. Through pain, they found purpose. Through grief, they discovered community. And though their hearts would always ache for the son and brother they lost, they carried forward knowing that his story had changed lives, brought people together, and reminded the world of the power of love, perseverance, and never giving up. When the dust finally settled after Jacob's discovery, Stockton felt like a different town. For months, the community had lived in a shadow of uncertainty, passing around flyers, scrolling through updates online, and whispering prayers at night. Jacob's name had been carried from living rooms to police stations, from local news broadcasts to national conversations. Now, as his family prepared to say goodbye, people realized this was more than one family's tragedy. It was a story that touched everyone who had followed it. The memorial service for Jacob was unlike anything the Vanzants had expected. The church overflowed with people, family, friends, and countless strangers who had only known Jacob through headlines. Photographs lined the walls. Jacob smiling at family dinners. Jacob fishing with his dad. Jacob joking with friends. His life wasn't summed up by the way it ended, but by the love he had shared in every stage of it. Jessica spoke first. Her voice trembled, but her words carried strength. She described her brother as someone who hated conflict, someone who could make you laugh when you least expected it, someone who was always willing to help without needing recognition. "For weeks, I fought for answers," she said, "but now I will fight for his memory." The crowd rose to its feet in applause, not out of custom, but because they felt her conviction in their bones. Joanna followed, clutching a framed photo of her son. She didn't talk about the pain, though it was written in her eyes. Instead, she talked about gratitude. Gratitude that Jacob had been hers for the years she had him. Gratitude that the community had carried them through the darkest hours. "My son may no longer walk this earth," she said, "but his story will walk on in every heart that refuses to give up." The service ended with something extraordinary. Dozens of people stood up, one by one, to share how Jacob's story had touched their lives. Some admitted they had grown closer to their families, realizing how precious time really is. Others had become volunteers themselves, inspired by adventures with purpose. Parents held their children tighter. Couples held hands. Strangers hugged like old friends. In the weeks that followed, Jacob's name continued to circulate, not just as a tragedy, but as a movement. Jessica began working with awareness organizations, pushing for stronger support in missing person cases. Her voice grew stronger with each interview, transforming grief into a call for change. Joanna, though quieter, became a symbol of resilience. She wasn't on stages or cameras, but in her community, she was present. She attended support groups for grieving parents, baked pies for neighbors, and wrote letters to families still searching. She knew the ache of not knowing, and she wanted to be a beacon for anyone still lost in that darkness. Adventures with Purpose, meanwhile, received waves of recognition. While they had already solved many cold cases, Jacob's story amplified their mission. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up, families contacted them daily, pleading for help. The divers knew they couldn't solve every case, but they carried Jacob's memory as a reminder of why they continued. For Stockton, Jacob's case became a lasting reminder that tragedy doesn't have to end in silence. It can awaken empathy, inspire action, and create unity. Jacob had not been a celebrity. He was a son, a brother, a young man who lived quietly. Yet his story rippled farther than anyone imagined, teaching that ordinary lives can leave extraordinary marks. As time moved forward, healing came slowly. Birthdays passed with empty chairs at the table. Holidays carried both laughter and tears. Joanna often visited the slough, standing by the water's edge where her son had been found. She didn't go there to dwell on the tragedy, but to feel close to him. Jessica, on the other hand, carried Jacob with her in every campaign she launched, every effort to make sure other families wouldn't have to wait so long for answers. Together, they kept their promise. Jacob would not be forgotten. His name wasn't just etched into gravestones or memorials. It was carried in stories, in change, in every person who had learned from his journey. The legacy of Jacob Vanzant is not one of disappearance, but of perseverance. It's the story of a mother who refused to stop searching, a sister who fought against despair, a community that stood shoulder to shoulder, and a team of strangers who became heroes. Above all, it's the story of how love never stops fighting, even when hope feels lost. As Joanna once said at a candlelight vigil, "Darkness doesn't win when we carry light. Jacob is our light, and through us, he will keep shining."